Hello and welcome back to the recap. Today we exit the vault and take on the perilous wasteland in search for a water chip in the 1997 classic RPG that is Fallout. As always, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content. Let's get started. Since the dawn of time, humans would find reasons to kill each other. Whether it was over territory, disputes, power play, or all combined, one thing was consistent: war. In the 21st century, war was waged over resources, precisely petroleum and uranium, because the fuel reserves ran out worldwide. Due to oil field exhaustions, the Middle Eastern powers lost their influence. The United Nations soon disbanded, Canada was annexed, and the European Commonwealth dissolved into fragmented bickering states, bent on controlling the last remaining resources on Earth. With tensions running at an all-time high and the world slowly slipping into endless despair, China invaded Alaska for its last remaining oil fields, starting the tiring, seemingly endless Sino-American War. The Judgment Day finally came on Saturday, October 23, 2077. The ever-growing intensity of the war culminated in usage of nuclear weaponry on both sides, reducing the planet to cinder in mere hours, wiping almost all life on Earth. This event would in history later be known as the Great War. Only a few were able to reach the relative safety of large underground vaults. These vaults were hardened subterranean survival shelters built to withstand nuclear devastation and supposedly protect a chosen fragment of the US population, so that one day America could rebuild itself. The vaults were made by a defense corporation called Vault-Tec, which was contracted by the US government back in the 2050s, when the nuclear threat was also very much present due to the Cold War. From the 50s up to the Great War, Vault-Tec became the largest and most powerful company in America, worth an estimated $1 trillion, with stakes in countless industries and businesses. Vault-Tec's wealth gave it immense sway against the US government, who was naturally rendered broke by, at this point, a decade-long Sino-American War. As Vault-Tec's power grew, so did their agenda. As much as the vaults were intended as a beacon of safety for the human race, the entire program was hijacked by a national conspiracy overseen by what would later become the Enclave, which we'll talk about in detail further down the road. Anyway, the purpose of the vaults very quickly became human experimentation, and as the nuclear bombs fell, the vaults were sealed and the experiments entered their decisive phase. However, the control vaults did function as primarily intended and protected their population, because the ones carrying out the deed also needed safety. Within the next few decades, many vaults failed as the result of their experiments, but the few that did survive often prospered. And in 1921, after receiving the all-clear signal, the vaults slowly started to open and people would emerge to the surface in hopes of rebuilding life on Earth. This resulted in creation of many factions and proved absolutely nothing had changed. The grand scheme of the so-called Master Reset was rendered absolutely ineffective because human nature does not change. What they had now was again a world with little to no resources and people fighting over them. Now that we've established the state of the world, we can fast forward 84 years later into 2161, where the game actually begins. You're a young member of Vault 13 and the Overseer Jacoran has chosen you for a very specific and dangerous task. The Vault's water purification control chip gave out and the reserves can only sustain life for another 5 months. The whole Vault now depends on your efforts, so you bravely exit into the remains of what used to be California and start your search for the water chip. The important thing to say is that not all the settlers left their vaults when the all-clear signal was initiated. Some chose to stay and thrive in the safety of the vaults rather than face the perilous wasteland, such as your community in Vault 13. Anyway, the first location the Overseer recommends you check is Vault 15 in case their water chip is intact and working, but upon your arrival you find nothing but mole rats and some supplies. Vault 15 had been abandoned. When the doors opened, the residents took their Garden of Eden creation kit, or GEC, and started a community called Shady Sands. Now let's pause for a second. This so-called Garden of Eden creation kit is basically a terraforming device created by Vault-Tec Corporation as well. It was meant to ease the process of harnessing the post-nuclear wasteland, but in reality it was a much more modest tool. The kit included seed and soil supplements, a cold fusion power generator, atmospheric chemical stabilizers, water purifiers, and matter energy replicators, which were advertised as capable of creating food and basic items needed for building new environments. The thing is that the usefulness of the kit was only based on assumptions, as its creators had no real way of determining what challenges the survivors of the nuclear war would actually face. But to get back on track, on your journey back you stumble upon Shady Sands. This settlement is small and self-sufficient, but would later surpass its neighbors and become the capital of the mighty New California Republic, but more on that in the sequels. You meet the village leader named Aradesh, and very soon you understand you either deal in supplies or favors. Nothing is free in the wasteland, especially not information, trust, and respect. In the light of your new knowledge, you are willing to take care of some red scorpions for Aradesh to prove yourself an ally of Shady Sands. Thus begins your proper wasteland initiation. Your kind offer attracts the attention of one of the townsfolk called Ian, a former Crimson Caravan Company guard who is willing to help you out for his piece of loot. By the way, the Red Scorpion is a well-known inhabitant of the post-nuclear wasteland and is basically a huge mutated version of the North American Emperor Scorpion. By taking care of these creatures, you are now able to get information on a couple of other settlements worth investigating in your search for the water chip, Junktown and the Hub. Ian is also willing to take this journey with you, so you have someone to watch your back on this suicide mission. Also, Ian knows the way to both those locations because he occasionally trades there for the settlement. Also, I mentioned he used to work for Crimson Caravan Company, so let's get their background out of the way. Crimson Caravan Company was established around 2151, that's 10 years prior to the story of this game. It quickly became one of the largest and most influential caravan houses in post-war wasteland, with their rapid rise owed to their insane company policy, which is that they would do any job under any circumstances if the price was right. They would literally lead their heavily armed caravans to hell and back if need be. Despite the apparent recklessness, the Crimson Caravan had the lowest caravan loss rate of all the companies. They stood the test of time and continuously expanded their operations. Later on, with the formation of the New California Republic, they would become one of the key drivers of the economy, establishing new trade routes and broadening their reach. But like I said, more on that in the sequels, as New California Republic still doesn't exist in this game. To get back to Ian, he was shot on duty by raiders and went to Shady Sands to recover, where he eventually made permanent residence. Anyway, your first stop south is Junktown, a settlement formed from the ruins of pre-war buildings, cars, and metal debris. It's a gritty, scrapyard-looking semi-lawless dump struggling to maintain order amidst the growing criminal influence. However, it does serve as an important waypoint for travelers and traders in South California. Upon your arrival, you are thrown in the middle of a fragile power balance between a lawful and a criminal faction. As you enter the town store to get resupplied, you witness an assassination attempt on the store owner, so you step in to help. After the assassin falls dead, the store owner introduces himself as Killian Darkwater. Turns out he's also the mayor and the sheriff of Junktown. He explains how there's a plot to assassinate him orchestrated by the Junktown ruthless crime boss named Gizmo. Since you're new, Killian suggests you pay a visit to Gizmo wearing a tape recorder, pretending to be a hitman looking for work in hopes of getting evidence that Gizmo truly did order the hit. Being owed and respected by a whole town seems like a pretty good deal in the state the world is in, so you accept. You do as you're told and get Gizmo to confess as he hires you to kill Killian. In the wake of this solid proof, Killian tasks you with wiping out Gizmo and his men. On your way to do so, you visit a bar called Scum's Pit, where you encounter a desert ranger of strong conviction named Tycho, who is willing to join your party for a chance to kill Gizmo. With Tycho the sharpshooter at your side, you feel much more confident about your chances, so you head to Gizmo's casino. Along the way, the town guard Lars also joins you in this endeavor. Seems like everyone is quite excited to off Gizmo. Anyway, you go to his casino and frag everything that moves, making Junktown a much safer place for future generations. Unfortunately, Killian cannot help you with the water chip situation since he doesn't know anything about where to find one, but he does give you a discount on all his wares, ensuring you always get fair price when resupplying in Junktown. It's important to say that the player has a choice here. There's the alternative to backstab Killian and actually take Gizmo's offer, ruling in favor of the crime syndicate to take over Junktown, but for this playthrough, we'll go with doing some good in this wretched wasteland. Once you've established your status with Junktown, there are a few more interesting things here, such as Dogmeat, the iconic trusty canine companion of the Fallout franchise. Your encounter with Dogmeat starts as this guy Phil cannot enter his home because there's a hostile dog at his front door. Phil explains how Dogmeat's previous owner was killed near Junktown by Gizmo's thugs. The depressed dog then wandered onto Phil's property and harassed him by not letting him into the house. Fortunately, your leather jacket reminds Dogmeat of his previous owner, so he just magically obeys you and you take him along, allowing Phil to re-enter his home. Also, Junktown is home to this guy called Dr. Morbid, who's apparently harvesting organs and shipping them to Hub for what seem to be cannibalism purposes. Speaking of the Hub, you continue down south as it's the second spot Ian mentioned. It's a massive trading city that serves as a central hub for commerce, faction, and information. It is also home to Crimson Caravan Company, which we talked about. The interesting thing is that the hub was founded in 2093 by a man named Angus who set up camp around an oasis in the desert and started out as a water merchant. Being the trade capital, the hub has a lot of factions such as merchants, caravans, criminals, and religious cults, but the most notable are obviously the water merchants Crimson Caravan, Fargo Traders, and Friendly Landing Company, ruled by an underground crime lord named Kane Decker. The situation with Kane Decker is pretty much the same as in Junktown with Gizmo. In his casino, you can get recruited as a hitman and you have a choice to either do the job or report him to the police with solid evidence. Reporting him to the police results in a raid on his casino and the extermination of his operation, which again gives you good standing in the hub. You're able to do a lot of side quests for other factions and improve or worsen your standing with the city, but I'll focus on a specific one given by Butch, the leader of the Fargo Traders. He hires you to find out who or what is raiding his caravans. After some interrogation, the consensus is that it's very likely a deathclaw that takes residence in a nearby cave. Now, although people at this point believe them to be mostly a myth, deathclaws are the true hazard of the wasteland. These menacing slabs of walking terror were originally the result of pre-war genetic engineering experiments. The US military wanted to create a replacement for soldiers in close combat situations. So, basically bioweapons that could shred through enemies and artillery unarmed. They spliced human genes with those of Jackson's chameleon, a large horned reptile with the idea to create a creature that was fast, resilient, stealthy, and deadly. After the bombs fell, deathclaws escaped containment labs and spread all across the wasteland. With no natural predators opposing them and near supernatural killing ability, they quickly became the apex predator in post-apocalyptic America. Anyway, you talk to an old settler ghoul named Harold for more information and convince this guy Slappy to take you to the cave, and lo and behold, there's a deathclaw waiting. Luckily, you found an alien blaster at the crashed UFO site, so you turned the deathclaw to dust. Here's where the important part comes. Next to the deathclaw is a body of what's called a super mutant, a huge humanoid beefcake. With his last breath, he reveals that they, super mutants, were the ones hijacking caravans and taking human prisoners. The hollow disk in his possession also reveals they were taking them to a base of sorts deep in the mountains. Although a side quest, this is foreshadowing the turn the story will soon take, but as it's building to a reveal, that's all I'm gonna say at this point. Also, this ghoul named Harold, who holds a lot of precious information, is quite important for the big picture. Remember him, cause we'll get back to him further down the road. Anyway, you return a hero again and go information hunting. You ask around the hub for a working water chip and the water merchants point you to a ghoul-infested town called Necropolis. They sometimes get their water supply from underneath Necropolis, but the key thing is that there's also a vault under the town, specifically vault number 12. The water merchants are not the only ones encouraging you to check out Necropolis, so with multiple sources pointing you there, you take your chances. The water merchants also mentioned that the ghouls keep mostly to themselves and are not a nuisance, but once you arrive at Necropolis, you're attacked by a bunch of them. This is because the ones you just encountered are feral. Before we move on, let's take a minute to explain the ghouls. Ghouls are living creatures that have been mutated by exposure to radiation. This mutation process yields different effects depending on the subject species and their individual circumstance. In humans, ghoulification typically results in an extended lifespan, enhanced regeneration, and natural immunity to radiation exposure, but it also renders them infertile and changes their appearance to one of rotten flesh or a burn victim. In a nutshell, it makes them look like walking corpses. As a result of their mutation, ghouls are considered a separate species and are a frequent target of discrimination in the wasteland, especially among the human population, so many of them prefer to live in their own communities, isolated from humanity. Some of the ghouls tend to get driven to madness by their physical transformation and the intense suffering they endure in the process. They lose all sense of reason and regress to their basic animalistic instinct, attacking any non-ghoul they come across. Hence, they are called feral ghouls. To get back to the story, you clear all the feral ones from the surface and find a hatch to the sewers. Upon further exploration, you stumble on a friendly bunch of ghouls who live down here. They implore you to stay your weapon and explain how they are in opposition to the Necropolis leader Set, who assumed most of the surface control of the city. Very soon you find that these ghouls in Necropolis are inhabitants of Vault 12. Remember how I said the vaults were hijacked by a government conspiracy and were used as experimentation tools? Well, Vault 12 is a prime example. Its doors were designed never to actually close, and when the nuclear bombs fell and the settlers of Bakersfield, California ran in to save themselves, the radiation flooded the whole vault right after them. This was due to government wanting to research the effects of radiation on humans, and surprisingly enough, not all the people died, but severe radiation turned them into ghouls. Over time, Set seized control over the group, pushing out the original overseer, and Bakersfield became Necropolis. For the last 73 years, Set led the city without any interference from the outside parties, because people quickly learned not to go near the city of the dead. What was happening, however, is an internal political strife, and a peaceful group of ghouls who opposed Set's leadership took shelter underground in the sewers. Despite Set's disgust for the tranquil ghouls, he reluctantly sends them whatever water they need because he fears that he wouldn't have enough people to defend the city if need be. But here comes the complication. The water pump Set uses is broken, and the peaceful ghouls now rely only on the water purification chip they indeed do have in Vault 12, and you desperately need. They beg you to find a way to fix the water pump in exchange for the chip, and you agree. Here you can also go all evil and simply kill the peaceful ghouls, but let's keep ourselves civil. Getting the water pump fixed turns out to be more challenging than expected, because it's guarded by a bunch of these slabs of meat looking to erase you from existence. These fine gentlemen are super mutants, just like the one you found in the Deathclaw cave. Again, I'm not gonna explain them in detail immediately because their introduction is kind of a mystery that leads us to Act 2 of this game, but what I can say is that a few years prior to the beginning of this game, the super mutants invaded Necropolis in hopes of finding an unopened vault with people inside. Instead, they got a fire exchange with the ghouls, and after too many died, Set negotiated peace with the super mutants by convincing them the ghouls actually are the settlers of Vault 12, after which the super mutants established a garrison in the town to ensure Set's cooperation and watch for humans. This recurring mission of super mutants hijacking humans is now evident, although it's still unclear what they need them for. Anyway, you clear the mutants out and salvage the pump parts around the city, returning water to Necropolis. Also, the water merchants can give you a quest to repair the pump as well, because it is the very location they take their supply from, so it's quite interconnected, but the main thing is that the ghouls keep their end of the bargain and allow you to take the water chip from Vault 12. Before we continue, I also want to point out that the fight with the mutants is the moment your companion Ian dies, canon-wise. He gets torched by a flamethrower and suffers a horrible death. Anyway, on your way back you stop at Shady Sands to resupply, only to find that Tandy, the daughter of the settlement leader Aradesh, was kidnapped by a group of raiders, with the intent to assert dominance and ransom Shady Sands for supplies and resources. All confident after your encounter with the ghouls and mutants, raiders feel like target practice, so we decide to help. Now, the name Raiders refers to basically anyone who pillages and plunders for a living, but in this case we're talking about a gang called the Khans. These posers are actually a group of people from Vault 15 who decided to go an alternate route and refused to be a part of the Shady Sands community. They adopted a lifestyle of raiding towns for loot and capturing survivors as slaves, believing strength is their key virtue and claiming that the weak should just perish. Their delusions of grandeur are pretty much cut short as you arrive guns blazing and teach them the meaning of "f*** around and find out." Of course, since this is an RPG, you have multiple routes for clearing this quest, which includes diplomacy, stealth, or challenging their leader Garl in one-on-one hand combat, but for the sake of canon, which is that they are nearly wiped out by you, and the satisfaction of course, without warning you decimate them and return Tandy safely to her father, making yourself the ultimate hero of Shady Sands. Anyway, you journey back home to Vault 13 and are welcomed as a hero that you are. The water reserves are replenished and everyone will live. Good job. However, your debrief has left the Vault Overseer quite concerned. The super mutant presence is quite larger and different than what natural mutations allow, which means someone has to be generating all these hunky seducers. What's even worse is that they seem intelligent and organized, as if they have a mission to fulfill, and since they're hunting for humans, it's just a matter of time before Vault 13 is compromised and no longer hidden. So, naturally, your reward for saving the entire Vault population is more perilous work, even more dangerous than your previous task. The Overseer implores you to find the location where this is happening so you can bring the whole operation down. You remember that the holodisk found on the Mutant in the Deathclaw cave mentions a base deep in the mountains, but that's not much to go on. So, with all the connections and charisma bonuses you've made, you roll up your sleeves and do some more information hunting. Among your inquiries, the name Brotherhood of Steel pops out here and there, a well-armed and armored mysterious group of people living in the fortress in the desert. Townsfolk make them sound very well prepared for the wasteland life, which leads you to believe they might know more about your mutant problem. Again, there are multiple ways to discover their hideout, whether by exploration or doing side quests for caravan companies, which is the easiest method as the route takes you nearby. Upon your arrival at the Lost Hills bunker, you are denied entry by the gatekeepers. But seeing as the Brotherhood welcomes new recruits, they are willing to grant you access if you perform an initiation task and join the ranks. There is a specific mission they put each newcomer through, which is to venture south into the desert, find the West Tech facility and bring back proof you were actually there. Sounds simple enough, except not exactly. To tie all this together and to understand why this location is important, let's start from who the Brotherhood of Steel even are. They're basically a post-war, technology-focused paramilitary order that was formed shortly after the Great War by a rogue US Army captain, Roger Maxson. Their core purpose is preserving advanced technology and regulating its usage. They believe humanity cannot be trusted with the means to destroy itself again, so they acquire all the technology they can find to prevent another apocalypse. This is exactly why the West Tech facility is a place of such interest to the Brotherhood. Its primary purpose was to research advanced technology. Now, what makes it such a dangerous site, on the other hand, is the fact that during the Great War, a nuclear bomb fell directly onto it, turning it into a huge radioactive crater. A couple of years later, the Brotherhood started sending expeditions to the West Tech facility believing there is valuable technology inside. And indeed, they were right, but since the radiation was unbearable, many of their first scavenging teams died in the efforts to retrieve anything. In honor of this, the Brotherhood created a trial by fire for new initiates, which is to enter the West Tech facility and make it back alive. In the wasteland, the West Tech facility is now known by its more common name, which is the Glow, because of its eerie irradiated atmosphere. Anyway, you get jacked on red access to prevent yourself from literally melting and enter the Glow. You find most of the labs still preserved, and more importantly, you find a holodisk on a dead Brotherhood paladin, which is more than proof enough you've made it to the Glow. Now, since some terminals are intact in this place, digging through them reveals some crucial information for your quest. West Tech research of new technologies was focused on two things. One was the development of the power armor, and the second, more important one, was the development of the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV. Now, the Forced Evolutionary Virus was a top-secret military experiment conducted by West Tech even before the Great War. It was originally intended as a bioweapon, a means to create super soldiers who are resistant to disease, radiation, and chemical attacks. FEV is basically a shifting mutagenic virus that rewrites an organism's genetic code. In theory, it enhances physical strength, durability, and intelligence by quote-unquote perfecting the DNA. In practice, however, its effects are way more unpredictable depending on the subject's genetics and exposure level. Most animals exposed to FEV become violent, oversized mutants, while human test subjects often suffer extreme physical changes and sterility. Although the whole picture is still unclear, you are able to connect some dots. You've encountered huge muscular humanoid super mutants who are abducting humans, and you just realize there is such a thing as brutal mutagenic virus. 2 + 2 tend to be 4, so you stroll back to Lost Hill Bunker and are given access to the Brotherhood of Steel's sanctum. After the grand tour, you meet the Brotherhood scribes, particularly Scribe Vree, who, with the help of your data, affirms that the super mutants are spreading by exposing abducted humans to the FEV, which subsequently makes them sterile. The sterility factor will also be very important later. You remember the info you found at the Deathclaw cave about the abducted humans being taken northwest to the mountains, and the Brotherhood reveals that the only point of interest northwest of them is the Mariposa military base. While the West Tech facility was the place of research and development, the Mariposa military base served as a testing ground for the Forced Evolutionary Virus. This is the exact location that ties into the birth of the Brotherhood of Steel, as its founder, Captain Roger Maxson, was actually stationed at Mariposa during the Great War. Over time, he found out the true purpose of the base was FEV experimentation on humans, and to be specific, his brothers in arms. Disgusted with this unnatural and ungodly ambition, he decided to kill all the scientists, after which he deserted and led his loyal troops deep into the desert, forming the Brotherhood of Steel. Anyway, you decide to do a bit of recon and you find the Mariposa military base. As you arrive, you realize it's heavily guarded by super mutants who are ready to turn you into Swiss cheese, so you backtrack to the Brotherhood and raise the alarm about something serious brewing there. Probably an army raised with a purpose. It takes a bit of effort, but you convince the Brotherhood elders to make a preemptive strike on the super mutants before it's too late. They put some paladins in your charge and you're on your way to clear the base. Your arrival brings doom and you start turning mutants to dust. Thanks to your new power armor and alien technology, you're immune to their natural intimidation, so you decimate their ranks until you reach the super mutant lieutenant. This self-righteous barbecue lord is eager to end your life, but is no match for your alien blaster and gets turned inside out. Now, let's pause here for a second and get into this whole mutant deal. One of the ways to reach the lieutenant is to get captured by super mutants. This opens up a dialogue where the lieutenant tries to beat a confession on your vault location out of you. If your speech is high enough, you get to converse with him and find out more about Project Unity. He vaguely mentions they serve someone known only as the Master and that he was the first. Turns out this master discovered the forced evolutionary virus some time ago and started creating super mutants who are supposed to be the next step in the evolution. And that's all I'm gonna say for now, as we're going the guns blazing route and saving the reveal for the end. Anyway, after you rid the base of super mutants, you find a control room with huge VATS tanks filled with forced evolutionary virus. The more interesting thing is a bunch of these cult-like cloaked figures in the room who appear to be human. As you approach them, they seem to spontaneously detonate, while mentioning their master and god. Anyway, you found a self-destruct code for the Mariposa base on the lieutenant, so you approach the control computer and use it. You make haste, and just as you exit, the base explodes, turning the whole facility into a pile of rubble, effectively crippling the production of super mutant army. You're now left with two terms to pursue: the Master and Project Unity. It is now confirmed this so-called Master is creating a superhuman army, but to what end? Once again, you make inquiries around the hub and the caravan companies tell you that the town of Boneyard to the south is home to a lot of weird and shady people. Now, this Boneyard is actually the remnants of what used to be Los Angeles, and is now divided between gangs, ID lists, and weapon dealers. It's called the Boneyard because of the remains of the LA skyline, highways, and burnt-out suburbs that stick like bones out of the desert. It is also a home to a recurring Fallout faction called the Followers of the Apocalypse. The Followers of the Apocalypse are important because their story arc ties the whole Boneyard together and nudges you in the right direction, but let's start from who they actually are. The Followers of the Apocalypse were a secular tribe formed shortly after the Great War in the outskirts of what used to be San Diego. Their migration to Boneyard happened very soon due to the proximity of the glow, which was causing them severe radiation poisoning. The harsh experience of the migration led a woman named Nicole to found the Followers of the Apocalypse, a community that rejects senseless killing for survival and instead is dedicated to preserving knowledge and guiding humanity towards peace and cooperation. They're non-militant and composed of idealists, healers, and teachers who gather knowledge from the old world. They're also in direct ideological conflict with the Brotherhood of Steel, who are on the other hand super militant and isolationist and strive to hide the technology and knowledge from people, while the followers stand for education and inclusivity. They both share the same end goal of not repeating the mistake of the nuclear war, but strive from two very different angles. In short, the followers may be naive, but at least they stand for rebuilding civilization through cooperation and knowledge instead of violence and domination. Anyway, to get back to your role in all this, the moment you arrive at Boneyard, you're thrown into another power struggle like at the rest of the towns so far. A self-styled militia called the Regulators has taken control of Editum, which is a settlement in the Boneyard, and is running it as a police state using intimidation and violence, all under pretense of protection. Nicole doesn't have the resources for the conflict with the Regulators, so she kindly asks you to step in for the sake of the community. Nicole also tells you about another gang called the Blades, who are willing to hit the Regulators provided with the means to fight, so you get to work. Long story short, you convince these weapons suppliers called the Gun Runners to provide the Blades with the means to wage war on the Regulators. With Blades and the followers working together, you successfully cleanse Editum of the regulators and make it a freer settlement aligned with the followers' ideals. Now, the followers tie into the main story through the fact that there is one more faction in the Boneyard that they're very suspicious of, and that is the Children of the Cathedral. Nicole tells you about them upon your inquiry of the Master and Project Unity because she's sure they're somehow connected to the rising mutant threat, which you thankfully put under control by destroying the Mariposa military base. Nicole also explains that the Children of the Cathedral present themselves as a peaceful religious order, but beneath their charity and sermon they definitely serve a darker purpose, preaching submission and blind devotion. Nicole knows all this because she infiltrated a spy by the name of Laura into the Children's ranks. All this sounds about right, so you head down to the cathedral and sure enough, you find the same cloaked cult-like figures you've encountered in the Mariposa military base. Upon your entry, you see obedient zealots and screens showing Unity logos. You ask around about who's in charge, and thanks to your speech skill check, this Lasher guy points you to the High Priest Morpheus. He's the day-to-day leader of the Children of the Cathedral and controls the visible religious structure. Now, this guy is way too arrogant and fanatical for a normal conversation, so you have no choice but to end him. Your actions reveal there are a bunch of invisible super mutants hiding in the cathedral. Now, these sneaky bastards are called the Nightkin, which is just a fancy name for these brutes packing stealth boys. A stealth boy is one of the most advanced technologies developed a couple of years before the Great War. It's a wrist-mounted device that generates a modulating refraction field which transmits the reflected light from one side of an object to the other, resulting in practical invisibility. It can range from translucency to near-perfect camouflage. Its biggest drawback, however, is the fact that it can cause permanent neurochemical changes, resulting in paranoia, delusions, hallucinations, and even schizophrenia. This is most prevalent among these Nightkin gentlemen. Anyway, you go berserk and dispose of all the Nightkin until you find the basement entrance. There's not much to be found down there, and just when you think of leaving, a secret door opens and a zealot named Jeremiah comes out. He demands answers about your intentions, so your natural reaction is to instantly cremate him. As you do so, these ungodly abominations hurl at you. They look like human body parts fused with gore and are next-level disturbing. These morbidities are called centaurs, and are a byproduct of forced evolutionary virus experimentation. Their creation process involves tossing a mix of different animals along with humans into FEV vat and then gaining back unholy chimeras as the virus produced rapid and unpredictable mutations. The resulting centaurs can quite radically differ in physical appearance, but all are somewhat humanoid. Super mutants basically keep them as pets and guard dogs. There are also these floater creatures which are supposedly mutated flatworms. Anyway, you dispose of them and uncover an entrance to the vault guarded by super mutants. This vault isn't labeled and was actually the first of its kind, serving as a prototype for showcasing before the war. Now, however, it has been repurposed into the Master's lair. Before we continue further down, let me just say that there is also a sneaky method of reaching the vault, and that is with the help of Laura, Nicole's spy. But since you're equipped with the power armor and an alien blaster, asserting extreme dominance over these shady suspects was super necessary. Anyway, you start blasting your way through the super mutants, and by the time you reach level 2 of the vault, things go full-on body horror. You notice human skin and flesh smeared all over the walls and hanging from the computers. The whole place is starting to look like people exploded here or something. Straight up nightmare. You also bump into scientists who are willing to die for the cause, so you neutralize them. Also, there are human specimens locked here, and as you enthusiastically free them, they just spontaneously explode as they run away. These guys, on the other hand, are already halfway into mutant land as their minds are completely consumed. Anyway, you proceed with neutralization of everything that moves until you reach a long, gore-infested hallway leading to your final confrontation.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
Now, this repugnant brutality before you is what the Children of the Cathedral and the super mutants refer to as the Master. He's actually willing to speak with you and even offers you to join him, so like with every proper villain, he explains his master plan and uncovers what Unity actually stands for. He's looking to forcefully create an ultimate super race that stands together to rid the world of humanity's flaws, which led to the nuclear war in the first place. He believes that turning everyone into super mutants is the way to go about it, which would naturally make him not only the master of the only existing species but also a god. What he doesn't know, however, is that the forced evolutionary virus comes with a deal-breaking setback, and that is sterility. The moment everyone is turned into a mutant is the moment they would have no way to procreate. Scribe Ree from the Brotherhood of Steel came to this conclusion with the help of the data you retrieved from the glow. You can actually challenge the Master with this fact and make him end his own life, as all of it was for nothing, but we'll go the classic way, so it's time to test how well the Master is prepared for your alien blaster. And turns out he isn't. After eating some energy cells, he bursts into pieces. Now, before we proceed to the epilogue, let's take a look at who this Master actually is. This mutated fusion of human skin, head, and electronics was once a man by the name of Richard Moreau, who was born before the Great War. When the bombs fell, he found shelter in Vault 8, which was one of the control vaults, but we'll talk about it in the sequel. Anyway, with the all-clear signal, Richard was cast out for undisclosed murder, after which he switched his last name to Gray and established himself as a doctor in the hub. He became quite popular among the townsfolk, but especially with a man named Harold, who admired him greatly. And yes, that is the very ghoul Harold from the hub Old Town. Before his ghoulification, Harold was a caravan master who wanted to put a stop on super mutant caravan raids, so he organized an expedition to neutralize the mutants at their source. Richard Gray naturally joined the expedition out of his academic curiosity, but very soon assumed leadership of it. They followed the trail northwest of the hub, which led them to discover the Mariposa military base, along with a horde of super mutants roaming in it. Although they sustained heavy casualties, Richard and Harold made it to the vat tanks where they were hit by a robot crane. Harold lost consciousness, but Richard was thrown into the vat tank filled with the forced evolutionary virus. Now, keep in mind that the reason the base was unsealed and overrun with mutants is because this is taking place years after Captain Roger Maxon executed the scientists and fled to form the Brotherhood of Steel. Anyway, after a week-long immersion and extreme exposure to FEV, Richard regained consciousness and pulled himself out of the tank. Harold, however, was nowhere to be found. Through his mutation, Richard noticed his increased psychological capacity, so like any other mad scientist, he started experimenting with creatures that strayed into the base, fusing them together in vat tanks. This laid the groundwork for unification, which would later become Project Unity. However, in lack of human subjects, he further injected his already mutated body parts with FEV until he gained the ability to neurologically link himself to the base's computer's database, which then aided him to bring in human subjects. After a long line of failures, he finally created the first intelligent super mutant, and ironically started raiding caravans along with settlements for human specimens. At this point, the super mutant army grew exponentially and Project Unity was solidified. Almost 50 years into this mad endeavor, the Master recruited High Priest Morpheus along with his zealots to act as spies and forefront of the operation. Very soon they relocated into the LA's prototype vault and built a cathedral over it. The cult was now official and had a name, the Children of the Cathedral. In LA, that is the Boneyard, the Master had access to an even larger network of knowledge and vault locations. Things were going according to plan, but 6 years later he met you. So, to get back to 2161, the Master falls dead and the self-destruction of the vault gets triggered by a single nuclear warhead kept in the lowest level of the vault just in case. You run out as fast as you can and the whole cathedral blows up, erasing everyone in it from existence. That's it. The Master and his vision of unity are terminated. You have saved your people. Hell, you have saved mankind itself. It's time to go home and enjoy a well-earned day's rest. As you approach the entrance to your vault, you are greeted by the Overseer. He sings you praise and explains how you've done the impossible for your community, but through the whole conversation something doesn't feel right. This whole reception feels off, and then the Overseer drops the bomb.
Everyone will want to talk to you. Every youngster will look up to you and want to emulate you. And then what? They'll want to leave. What happens to the vault if we lose the best of a generation? What if we are the only safe place in the world? You just gave us back all these lives. I can't take the chance of losing them. I've made a lot of tough decisions since I took this position, but none of them harder than this one. You saved us, but you'll kill us. I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.
Now, the Overseer is a bit too confident for his own good, so we instantly provide him with the bloody mess treatment. He probably wasn't expecting that to happen, but let's get real. As far as there was some logic to his decision, this guy sent you on a triple suicide mission you somehow survived, prompting you to become the savior of the mankind, and then expected you to take on the role of the exiled hero martyr. Enough is enough, so disgusted and disappointed, you venture into the desert never to be seen or heard again. History, however, will always remember you as the Vault Dweller who helped reshape the face of Wasteland and future in whole. Your side efforts also echoed throughout the land. With the destruction of the cathedral and the regulators, the followers of the Apocalypse gradually took control of the Boneyard, transforming it into a center of higher learning and research. Later, with the creation of the New California Republic, Boneyard becomes the world's first post-war educational center. The Brotherhood of Steel helped the other human outposts drive the mutant armies away, with minimal loss of life on both sides. The leftover mutants then fled around the wastes, mostly northwards, with the more charismatic ones establishing leadership over fragmented like-minded groups. The Brotherhood then slowly introduced their advanced technology into New California, while wisely remaining out of the power structure, only to become a major research and development faction. Regarding Necropolis, if you repair the water pump, the game serves you the ending of ghouls learning to maintain it and eventually selling the technology to other cities. But the canon fate of Necropolis is much more bleak, as stated in the second installment. A month after you fixed the water pump and slaughtered the mutant garrison station there, the Unity launched a retaliatory strike on the city that ended in mass slaughter and caused the quote-unquote Great Migration of the surviving ghouls. This migration later led to founding of other ghoul-friendly settlements like Gecko, Dayglow, and Broken Hills. As far as the hub goes, we have to see what actually happened with Harold after the expedition to Mariposa military base. After he was knocked out by the robotic crane, he woke up in the middle of the desert days later, with the exposure to FEV already mutating and twisting him. Sometime after, the merchants found him and offered him a ride back to the hub, where over the years his transformation took its final toll. Twisted by the mutation and left with no one, he moved into the derelict building in the old town of Hub, to live among the impoverished cast-offs. The saddest thing about Richard and Harold is that they both thought the other one was dead, so they never went looking. Anyway, the Hub's canon ending states that with your assistance, old Harold brings the ghoul population of the Hub into equality with humans, making the two sides work together, and as a result, the Hub prospers. Moving up north, thanks to your help with Gizmo, Killian Darkwater enforces his own brand of frontier justice, driving out the last of Gizmo's kind and making life in Junktown fair and safe under his law. As for the Shady Sands, Tandy helps her father Aradesh bring a new community and life out of the broken remains of the world. They're responsible for the creation of the New California Republic, whose ideals spread across the wasteland, with Aradesh as the nation's first president and Tandy as its second. And there you have it, the whole story of the first Fallout game. Since this is an RPG, there are naturally multiple ways to approach the main story and side quests with multiple outcomes. You can even go the route of joining the Master and becoming a super mutant yourself, but personally I found the route presented in this recap the most entertaining, and I feel it's most logical story-wise. It takes you step by step through proper timed reveals to make it most interesting, and another important thing is that it gives you canon endings to factions and towns. The only non-canon thing was the murder of the Overseer, but when I saw it for the first time I played the game, it was such a surprise I had to include it here. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
We will tear ourselves apart fighting each other.